Good evening, everyone, and Merry Christmas. And thank you for coming to join us at St. Paul's tonight. I was watching my wife Philippa preach on Sunday morning and realized there's a problem with having a see-through pulpit, and that's you can actually see people's notes. And then you get a bit distracted just wondering how long each page is going to take. So I've made it really difficult for you. You can't see them. But I'm going to be kind because I know that actually, having sat out there quite a lot, there's probably three questions going through your mind. Who is he? How long is he going to take? And will he be any good? Okay? So my name's John Heather, and I'm part of the leadership team here. And when you'll normally find me at Sunday evening services at 6 o'clock in the evening. And I'm going to talk for 15 minutes. And only one person's heard this other than me, and that's my wife, and she says it's good. So you can relax. Well, she would, but actually she's my biggest encouragement, but my fiercest critic. So if it wasn't any good, she'd tell me. So you can relax, but you do need to strap in, because we're going to go a little bit at pace, because we want to do justice to the incredible truth of the incarnation. The incarnation means God becoming flesh, and that's awesome. Timothy Keller said this: I've become convinced that what makes the difference for Christianity is the incarnation. No other faith said God became flesh. Christmas and the incarnation mean that God went to infinite lengths to make himself one whom we can know personally. Another theologian, J. Packer, says the Almighty appeared on earth as a helpless human baby, needing to be fed and changed and taught to talk like any other child. The more you think about it, the more staggering it gets. Nothing in fiction is as fantastic as this truth of the incarnation. I think the incarnation is actually intended to assault our senses. It is such an outrageous claim. It is either the most glorious and majestic truth, so immense it can't possibly and shouldn't be ignored, or a complete sham. And we, as Christians, are without doubt the most to be pitied. I'm not sure what you think about when you think about the incarnation, but for me, when God takes on flesh, it's a universe-sundering, earth history-altering, life-transforming, paradigm-shattering event of history. It really is significant. Let me slow down a little bit and tell you a story. At the beginning of December, Philippa, my wife's just down there, who says this is good, and who you know better than me, because she's preached here far more than I have, we went to a local garden centre to look for clothes. That's probably a sermon in itself, how society has changed, that you go to a garden centre on a Sunday to look for clothes, but that's for another time. But in order to get to the clothes section, we had to walk through their Christmas goodies section. So there were trees and the wreaths and tinsel and decoration, the whole works. It was frankly quite overwhelming and incredibly expensive. But at the heart of all this, we came to their dining section, okay? And there they had plates and cups and glasses and crackers, the whole caboodle. And at the very center of that, there was a large table, which was, as you would expect, was magnificently decorated. And I looked at it for a while and I said to Philippa, they've missed something. There's no room for the food. You see, we have 5 sons. And when we all get together, there's 15 of us. So we know a little bit about the dynamics of feeding large families. And I can assure you that when they sit down to eat, and we can't get them all around one table, they're not interested in the decorations. What they're interested in is the community and the food. And what had happened is that the garden centre had got so taken up with the ornaments and all of that stuff. They've missed the main attraction. When you listen to that scripture that we just heard, you would imagine that there was no way that this child, this son that was going to be given, could ever be missed. What he was going to do was so dramatic that surely nobody in history would miss an event like that. But that's exactly what did happen. Imagine with me for a moment that you've survived this sermon, you've got through Christmas, you've got through the new year, and then you're in the middle of January, and you discover that just a few girls down from you, either Sir Keir Starmer or David Beckham or Taylor Swift, is moving in. Now, would you miss that? Would anybody in the street miss an event like that? Would anybody in Weston not know about it? Of course not. These are important people, aren't they? They're celebrities, powerful and rich, on the A-list. No one would ever miss them. But just over 2,000 years ago, an even more important person than Sir Keir Starmer or Taylor Swift or David Beckham actually moved into our neighborhood, as the message says. And virtually everybody missed his coming. And even those that didn't, God had to work really hard to get their attention. For the shepherds in the field, there was an orchestra of angels. For the magi from the east, there was a strange light and star in the sky to guide them. How could that happen? How could God punch a hole in the roof of the world and climb in, and virtually everyone miss it? That scripture, that prophecy from Isaiah, was actually given some 650 years before the birth of Christ. And by the time he was born, the Jews had a very clear idea about who the Messiah would be and how that prophecy would be fulfilled. For them, this Messiah would be a powerful military leader, a mighty warrior, one who could lead the nation of Israel and vanquish all their oppressors and restore the kingdom to them. They wouldn't be subjugated and slaves any longer. This Messiah would usher in a new age of political independence and military might, a glorious new age of cultural and military supremacy. No one expected, even contemplated for a moment in their wildest dreams what actually took place. And let's be fair, none of us would have done either, because it is so outrageous. God became flesh. The infinite prepared to willingly embrace becoming incontinent. When I say that, does it grate a little? Does it feel a bit offensive? The infinite becoming incontinent? It grates with me. I kind of feel like, Lord, am I offending you? But it's not an offense at all. It's a glorious, wonderful truth. Jesus comes and inverts everything by the most momentous act of self-emptying. Philippians says he laid aside his majesty. Just take a pause and imagine yourself in heaven at the moment that this happens. Heaven's normally quite noisy, but at that moment it would have gone very quiet. Because the angels and the archangels, the cherubim and the seraphim, they've never seen anything like that. At this moment, Jesus, think about the power it takes for God to empty himself. Think about the self-control it would have taken Jesus as he begins to empty himself to allow it to continue. And think about the ferocious love that compelled him to do it. Of course, he did it for the whole world, but the scripture teaches that as he emptied himself, he had your name and my name on his lips and in his heart. John Heather, I'm coming for you. I'm doing this for you. You can put your name in there too, because that's what the scripture teaches is true. In the incarnation, Jesus ushered in a kingdom that turns everything on its head and brings the person of God up close and personal. In this kingdom, instead of being powerful, Jesus is vulnerable. Instead of being strong, Jesus is weak. Instead of lording it over others, he's a servant. Instead of fighting for his right and making demands, he willingly sacrifices himself. No one saw this coming. And through it, Jesus has rewritten history and ushered in a whole new kingdom. We love a hymn, Lord of Lords, and it goes like this: in the darkness we were waiting, without hope, without light, till from heaven you came running. There was mercy in your eyes to fulfill the law and prophets. To a virgin came the birth, came the word. Till from heaven you came running. There was mercy in your eyes. Back to that scripture reading, the words there. Last Friday, I came home from work to find my family watching Mr. Beast. If you don't know who he is, he's a YouTube influencer. And he's got over 200 million followers. In fact, to get to over 200 million followers, he set himself up to be buried alive for 7 days. There are lots of influencers out there, and they're trying to do just what the name says, influence people. And if people want to subscribe to Mr. Beast, I'm kind of okay with that. But I've subscribed to another influencer, one who has several billion followers. He was buried when he was genuinely dead, but he only stayed in that tomb 3 days. If anyone has wisdom and counsel about how to live this life, it's Jesus. He came from heaven, incarnate God. He lived here. He lived a sinless life. He died a sacrificial death, and he rose triumphant. He's my wonderful influencer. Mighty God. Life's tough. Anybody agree with that? Yeah. Some of you here today might have had really tough days. You kind of think you should have done it. It's Christmas Eve, but maybe you did. Maybe if not, a tough week or a tough month, even a tough year, or perhaps you know coming into 2025 it's going to be tough. The good news is this: Jesus came to get up close and intimate. He's made this whole thing really personable. God is no longer aloof and distant. He is an ever-present help in trouble. And the good news is that Jesus is a warrior God. And he loves to fight with you and often for you. You don't have to battle life on your own. Wonderful influencer, mighty God. Everlasting Father. Ooh. You know, sometimes when you get to read a scripture, you kind of know there's a bear trap. And every time we talk about father and fatherhood, I kind of know that in the society we live, you've got to preface it with a rider. Because there's an enemy out there who has so trashed fatherhood that we're ashamed of it. The problem is that because we've let go of fatherhood, we're in deep trouble. We've got generations of young people who have no idea who they are. They have no security and no identity because they don't know who they are and they don't know whose they are, because we've lost sight of fatherhood. And I get it. There are poor fathers out there. There are absent fathers out there. There are abusive fathers out there. We all carry father wounds. But the answer to wrong use and misuse can't be no use. It has to be right use. We need to redeem the truth of fatherhood, not let go of it. And who better to do that than Jesus? He came as the Son from the very bosom of the Father. And it says that he came to explain him, to make him fully known, to reveal him. Jesus said, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. That's redemptive. That's redemptive. Wonderful influencer, mighty God, everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. When I'm not here that often, I actually spend most of my time as a local GP. And I witness firsthand how poor the mental health of our community is. It's not just Western, it's the whole nation. Since COVID, there has been a massive surge in people struggling with stress, anxiety, and depression. And if you think the NHS does physical health poorly, we really suck at mental health. Resources are so scarce that individuals can't get referred quickly enough and they don't get the appropriate services that they need. And I don't say this to make a political point, but to emphasize the fact that the last name is Prince of Peace. When we think about peace, we often think about a sense of tranquility, that soft sigh after a long day, or the quiet absence of conflict. But in Scripture, peace is not merely the absence of war or arguments. It's about living in a right relationship with God and others. It touches every aspect of our lives, our minds, our hearts, our relationships, and most importantly, our spirits. The word peace in the Bible is so rich. In Hebrew, it's the word shalom, and it means completeness, wholeness, and well-being. This peace is not just a fleeting feeling. It represents a deep-rooted sense of harmony that comes from a secure relationship with God. The peace of God is a profound gift that's rooted in the person of Jesus, the Prince of Peace. It surpasses all understanding, and it can keep a guard on your heart and on your mind. This peace can hold us together even when the world around us is chaotic, dark, and uncertain. When you look at the ocean, the surface can be turbulent and choppy, but the deeper down you go, the quieter and more restful it becomes. And that's what it's like with God. That's what it's like with Jesus, our Prince of Peace. The deeper you go into him, the more supreme and permanent will be your experience of his peace. Thank you for listening. Tozer said this: the incarnation is so important that every time we think about it, we should stop and bow our head for a moment. So as Sam comes to take over, I want you just to do that. Just to close your eyes, bow your head, and think about this mighty act of self-emptying. He gave himself. He became flesh for you and for me.